Okay, welcome to the second session of this conference, this symposium on methodology and artistic research, or the opposite, artistic research and methodology. I'll keep my introduction quite short. This panel deals with research environments, and I just want to make clear so that it's for everybody, that everybody can see what we could mean by research environments, whether it's the workshop, the atelier, where artists, artistic researchers are working, whether it is the open space, the public domain where they are working. Sometimes it is the school, sometimes it's the collective where they are apart from. So I define or redefine research environment here in a broad sense. We have today three guests, and sometimes they will present visual material, sometimes they will be interviewed by me. We have different formats of leading or of animating the discussion today, and as in the previous session, I'll leave the floor to the three artists, artistic researchers who are present here, and after that I will try to ask some questions, and you can also send me questions by Facebook. The chat function of this YouTube channel doesn't function as it should, but we can try to have questions from the audience by the Facebook account of this event. Okay, I'll start with Hannah de Meyer. Hannah de Meyer is a performance artist and writer, theater maker, and I leave the floor to her.
Okay, very short introduction.
This is indeed a very short introduction.
So the question was like, what is your research environment?
Yeah.
And I've decided to talk about quite a internal research environment, and I would like to share some things about somatic experiencing today. And somatic experiencing is a sort of body practice where the idea is, or the practice consists of directing the attention from the frontal lobe in your brain to what in somatic experiencing is called the felt sense of the body. And so the felt sense is actually how your body feels, or how parts of your body feel at a specific moment in time. And then the idea is to describe these sensations in very like material ways. So they can have colors or temperatures, like are they hot or cold? What kind of textures do they have? Is it like bubbly, or a sensation of melting, or collapse? Or an expansion, and I think it's very interesting, because sometimes to this practice is that sometimes sensations we would call very we would easily call like this is just sad or happy or fear or stress, that when we tune into them they are actually way more subtle and a lot less psychological, and so very material, abstract, and also immediately already dynamic. So these sensations are already movement. And then another interesting exercise is that you would flip through a collection of pictures or a magazine with pictures, and that you would look at these pictures and not interpret them this is something, I see this on this picture and this reminds me of that and that and that, but that you would sense what kind of sensations they trigger in the felt sense or in the nervous system of your body. That it's interesting then to see that an image, or also not only an image, but something a person says or a thought, it always comes into the felt sense in a specific place, and it generates movement. And I think that this felt sense is a sort of kinetic tissue, or that communication always has a very material, bodily, and kinetic layer to it. I think that's a very interesting way of also looking at a very interesting entry point in looking at performance and in text and movement on stage, and how they could be combined. And I think it's an interesting way of looking at not only the performing body, but just as a body, that there is a lot of different intelligences working in the body, and that there's cells, there's cell memory, there is muscles, there is bones, there is the nervous system that always they are matter, and this matter has its own intelligence, its own way of moving, its own agency, and it is not a layer, it's very different layers of communication that we can address and that we can become more conscious of, besides the layer of communication that happens through the passing back and forth of meaning through words. Let's see, so then I think when I write a text, I never start from a blank page. I think I'm always surrounded by texts of other writers, and I like that a lot. It's like a sort of protective circle of other voices and other people that surround you while you work. It's the opposite of the genius artist who starts from the blank page and invents everything from scratch. I like that I'm inside an environment, and that I inherit inside a specific discourses and not others, and that I continue to work on the work of other people, and I often start from theoretical texts. Now they're mostly theoretical texts about ecological collapse, but also about ghosts in a very broad sense, like creatures or people or beings that are ghosted or disappear, or ghosts that decide to come back, or invisible creatures that make themselves palpable. And pleasure also, how you, the political quality of being able to feel pleasure and being able to share pleasure. These are the texts or the concepts I'm mostly interested in. And when writing, I start from these theoretical texts, but my relation to them, or the relation that I try to establish between these theoretical texts and then a performance or a performance text, or a text of mine, is not one of translation, So I don't think about these concepts that attract me. How will I now translate them into a theatrical image or into a poetic text rather than theoretical text? But it's like my relation to them is more a somatic relationship, and I try to sense, like, not which concepts, but which specific paragraphs and which specific sentences and which specific combinations of words trigger an interesting felt sense reaction. And then how I work is that actually I try to stay with these sensations long enough so that my nervous system or my body or my organs, or I don't know, can inform me about other images that have the same vibration as the sensations that these concepts and theoretical texts create. And then I compose texts and out of this composed. So it's a relation of compost more than of translation. And I think when performing or then when writing, if we look at the language structure, I think it's interesting to look at rhythmicality and voice modulation and movements and breath and sounds, because the felt sense reacts strongly to these like more material approaches to words so what I try to do in the text is to actually foreground the visceral sensations that are triggered by these theoretical texts. That is then, the performance text that arises, that is already always a moving body already.
Yes, I just want to comment on that. So, talking about research environments for you, the research environment are, as I hear it, two things. That's the body, as such, is a research environment, and the next is the kind of pool of texts that you dive into in a certain way to create your own voice.
Exactly.
At that point, it relates to the first environment by translating it into what you call felt sense. Do I summarize it correctly like
correctly.
that? And like very much the image of compost, because that's also, it's not only something, not a clean distinction of what the environment is, but it's also, it has indeed something smelly.
It has something smelly, and it has something, like always there is, it never dissolves into one homogeneous matter. There is always snippets of what you put into it that remain, and that is true, that I like that a text is a haunted house where you also summon other voices. And I often describe it that when I perform some parts of the text, they work like an acupuncture point that reactivates the sensation that the sort of theoretical text activated in the first place, or something when reading it at first. So,
yeah, I can follow that. I saw your performance, New Skin, where indeed, you try to, in my experience, it was like witnessing your own creation, your own birth, your own physical birth in a certain way, which is an experience, of course, nobody has and nobody can put into discourse, so to say. But by translating every sentence, it was voice off. You spoke on scene, or
yes, absolutely,
you spoke on scene,
non-stop.
but it at the same non-stop. But at the same time, it had the idea that someone else was speaking at the same time. So so that's why I remember it also as a kind of voice off, although it wasn't. But it immediately was also indeed a somatic experience. It was your body who was talking. It was not simply your mouth. Okay. You want to add something more?
Maybe later in the conversation, but I'll just stop for now.
Okay, so yes, that was, excuse me for the very short introduction.
No,
I should have said before that in my experience, New Skin was a very illuminating way to know what you mean by research environment. In the terms of this symposium. So the next speaker is Amber Vanluffelen. Thank you for joining us at such a late notice. You're visual and performance artist, and you deal a lot in all kinds of environments with the public domain. That's without anticipating too much, you should show it yourself. You have made a video compilation, can I say,
exactly.
of your work, and you will give some comments on that.
Yeah.
You have the floor.
Okay, so as you said, I draw a lot of inspiration from my direct and public environment, but also I draw inspiration from subcultures such as the ballroom culture, street ball, basketball culture, popular culture like trading card games, anime, and I will show you a compilation of my work. Parts of it are videos about my work. Some are videos which are the actual work. It's in chronological order, and I made a selection based on how they relate to their environment and how the environment is inevitable to the work itself. Could also be the social environments, physical environments. I also manipulate certain environments in a way to go beyond certain boundaries, physical, territorial boundaries, conceptual boundaries. And also I try to manipulate the environment or create new environments. For example, sculptures that I create that become my environment to generate whatever I want to speak about, whatever I'm passionate about. It gives me the opportunity to do certain things, as you will see in the compilation. I'm gonna also comment on some images because I didn't put any titles or dates or places, so just to make it more clear. Most of the works, there is only one work which is unfinished, and there you will see also two collaborations. But I will let you know. All right, I'm gonna present my presentation. So this is my first site-specific work in the Middelheim Museum in Antwerp. And this is an exchange between the public space and the domain of the Middelheim Museum. So I actually made an opening in the fence because the whole museum is surrounded by a fence, and created this kind of free space within the museum. So it's basically always accessible whenever the museum is open or closed. Here you see a collaboration with Adam Galland and Gijs Waterschot and myself. It's a sculpture we created, and we carry it through the whole city to eventually set it up in the exhibition place, which is a construction site. So the title of the work is Where the Birds Like to Sit. The shapes that you see on the construction are actually roofing pieces. I'm not sure if it's the correct word, roofing in English. It's 6 meters high. This is a video work.
Yes, it's good.
It's called Affection for a Public Facade, and it's in Athens, in Greece. I took a sample from the wall, and I tried to recreate the paint in a local paint store. And as you can see, I'm painting over the building. It's a typical neoclassical building, and it's one of the very few buildings that are untouched in the city, in the sense that all the other buildings are full of graffiti except for these iconic neoclassical buildings, which have a big historical... they are very loaded, let's say. So it's kind of an intervention in this in-between space, a public building, like on its surface, touching the surface and making an invisible, almost invisible adjustment. What you just saw was me practicing in the entrance of apartment buildings, which I used to do a lot. And before, you saw a maquette of this apartment building, and underneath it had little cabinets in which I put writings about my dance experience. This is my fictional dance studio. So I created a lightning box. I put it in the city somewhere. And it's kind of the front, the cover of yeah. When I started dancing, I was practicing in just rehearsal spaces, and this is kind of a way to bring it all together and to have this nomadic practice opportunity.
And if you want to do that, I can't stop you. It's a wonderful thing. At least they're doing
So I'm just going to pause it here for a moment. So it's not about my dancing skills because it was in the very beginning, but it's actually the performance is in a garden, and the idea is that I'm practicing in my own backyard in front of a mirror. And the performance is not so much the dance itself, because it's just me practicing as I am in the beginning of my experience. But I created a radio program actually that I live broadcasted on a local radio station, and I have you could hear someone speaking, which is Tyrone Proctor. He's like one of the original generations or second OGs of this whacking subculture, and he's a great dancer himself. And so basically the performance is making the audience listen to this radio program, and through radio giving this narrative, this information, and me, I'm just listening to this radio program as well as the audience, in fact. So it's more about what I create around, like how I can provide a context in which I can practice at that time. Yeah. So this was a ball that happened in Brussels from the ballroom culture, created by Foral Queens or organized by Foral Queens and Arleta Vanza. And so, as I said, I draw inspiration from ballroom culture. This was more in the past, in fact, but it's an example of how I relate to my environment and how my environment is or an inspiration or a workplace. And for example, for this ball, I created the grand prizes, so the trophies that the participants could win. Voilà. So basically, I take this as an inspiration within my practice, but I also like to, or find it very important to go into this specific reality and make the thing, whatever I make it come alive and make it being a part of life, specifically of the life of this subculture. So I was very grateful to be able to create the grand prizes.
Stepping into bounds with all your presence. You might be lucky because you are playing home in your own house. Like kicking balls in somebody else's yard, well darn. This somebody just threw you darts. You targeted getting dragged out onto the beam. It's a battle and there is no word like negate to debate in this dictionary. Better be prepared and take your passion. One can mutter about, what is it that I want? What do I want? But you see, I can speech so many W's, but the one that starts whacking to strike with force, may it hit where the heart fits. Rida, Kaire, Inayagu, Suzume, Sendo, Garpre.
In each one of them lies the capacity to evoke powers. See you in the paint, see you in bounds. Let me do all the things you want me to do. Just tonight, baby, I wanna get freaky with you. Let me lift you up and down till you say it's done. Let me play with your body, baby, make you real. στο κορμί σου να αρχίσω. Τι λέω δεν ελέγχω τον εαυτό μου. Εναντίον μου η καρδιά και το μυαλό μου. Είσαι ζάλι που με κάνει ό,τι θέλει. Είσαι ο έρωτας που με χτυπά με τέλει.
I think at 10 or even late, even sooner, it's gonna be like really crowded, and also it's really it's a very male space. That was the other issue of the public playground. Like as a feminist, I get a bit angry about that because I just see guys. I'm not against guys. I like to play with guys, but I would like to also play with more with women and to see more women on the basketball playground because there are a lot of women playing basketball, and I think they.
This booster pack, a sacred artifact, wrapped in a foil, shiny, luring you into hunting and collecting. And inside that will challenge you. Keep it close and sealed, it will rest in its possibility to be anything, have any value, but might it be that the real value only comes true when taking matter in your hands, when taking off its shiny, appealing host. Connect to the cards in your hands, its 5 elements, all gates into dimensions. Mythical, a vehicle generating its true content, armed to go hand in hand with the one taking up on its understanding, therefore providing a platform as displayed here. A gate, a court, where one can dwell, explore, play, search to land, to end all that lies latent, veiled, a cover to forever be able to discover its most valuable insight. Trust your first instinct, pull your cards, activate it, and come through manifesting whatever it is that you hold in your heart. Conduct your game. Take the cards in your hands and let them strike. May they hit where the heart fits.
Let me do
So this last video was a collaboration with Matthias Mu. We have a collective which is called methodologicalbottlenecks. So it was the video with the cards, which is also unfinished, our work in progress. Voilà, I think I had my time.
Thank you, Amber. I will, for the last contribution, I will go to Stéphane Galland. Stéphane Galland is a percussionist, a drummer. He hits things, as he expresses it. He is working as a PhD candidate at the KCB, at the Conservatorium in Brussels. And he has a long career as a musician and is mostly known as the drummer of Akamun.
Exactly.
We have prepared a small interview a few days ago, and the first question I wanted to ask Stéphane is what is your primary research environment? Is it your group, the group of musicians you work with? Is it because you are a teacher also, is it the group of students you relate to? And in what sense do these environments contribute to your work as a researcher?
Yeah, I think all of them, actually. Also, because the topic of my PhD is cultural roots and interactions of contemporary rhythm in jazz. That has a lot to do with the influence of different cultural background, traditional music. So from there already it made it so obvious that the environment is essential, especially about traditional music. I noticed when you go there and you actually play and exchange with a musician from that culture, you really get much more than just studying or listening or things like that. So that I think that's one of the first big influence in an environment.
Could you illustrate that with an example of a particular, let's say?
Well, I have many examples, and one very interesting thing, it's at some point with Akamun, we went to visit the Pygmies in Central Africa. And just before going really deep in the forest to meet them, we were staying in a little village, already with no electricity, nothing. And there was some kids playing drums. And you know, in African music, what's very interesting is that you have a lot of different grooves that are very organic, that you cannot explain mathematically, or I mean, you could, but you cannot keep values very straight, like we learn here. 8 note is like that, 16 note is like that, a triplet is like that. It's very, very regular. In Africa and a lot of other traditional music, you find a very interesting organic way of playing rhythm. And there was a little girl playing, and she was hitting some piece of wood with also a very big piece of wood, and she was doing like, and that was a groove that I thought, yeah, how they do that kind of groove. And then I noticed that because she was carrying that very heavy stick of wood, and because her sticking was right, left, right, left, the second right was a bit too late because of the weight and because of the energy that it demanded. And therefore it created that kind of very specific groove that I was listening, but I could not figure out that that sticking could lead to the right way to do it. so that's a very interesting, I think, example of the environment really showing me how to develop that, how to understand for real. But there are many other things that I noticed influence me a lot just by sometimes by just being with some amazing master. Like I played with maybe the greatest mridangam player. That's the main percussion instrument in South India. He's really like a phenomenon, and I played many times with him, and we also did many car trip, together in England. So I was sitting next to him, like in between two people, very, very close environment. And he would just start singing rhythm and hitting my my knee like that while singing. And just that, I think it was the best learning thing that I got from him, just because we traveled and the proximity and the fact that, he was just hitting my leg, like it's a very strong transmission. And I have a lot of other examples, like going to Bulgaria, for example, because in Bulgaria they have a lot of rhythm with uneven beats. Here most of the thing we hear, it's a very regular beat, either binary, ternary, but it's still always regular. But in the Balkans, and especially in Bulgaria, they have a lot of traditional dances and rhythm that have irregular rhythm. So they will have, for example, short, short, long, short, 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 long, short, 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 long, short, which is very unusual for us. But when you go there, I remember we were in a restaurant, and there was some traditional music, and then a whole group of family would go and dance on that rhythm that for any well-trained musicians here, it would be hard to follow because it's very unusual. And just being there and seeing those people dancing on it made it look so obvious and so natural that it influenced you really to the deepest. And I think that's one of the best way to learn. And that's why I'm trying to, at the conservatory, create this kind of environment of exchange between, for example, what I know and what I've learned and what I've got from those people. I think the best way to transmit it is to actually play and perform and exchange with the students.
So in terms of research environment, you have you create or you visit environments that become a research environment when you're involved in it.
Exactly.
And what is interesting for me also, also having heard the other experiences, that it is a very physical, very somatic thing, this environment. And then the next step is when it goes on research as research, then you transmit it or you translate it to a different kind of environment, which is the conservatory, whatever that means physically here. Can you develop a bit on that? How that transmission, if it is a transmission, happens?
Yes, that's something that's I think is really exciting to also to find the right tools to transmit it, like because I know that it's not just as simple as I just said, like you are in an environment with people learning completely different music and then it works like that. It's not at all the case. It's very, very tricky to get into something that people have played for thousands of years, and then you come up with a background that's completely different. So you have to find a way to translate that and find ways to integrate it, because that's the main point. I think that especially about rhythm, I think the physical thing is really important. That's why I'm happy to be with you, because I think that's really a link that physically, if you want to integrate some new thing, I think you need to feel it. It cannot just stay in the brain, but because we are Western Europeans, I think we are very used to use the brain. So it's important to find the right way to use the brain so that the idea can come in the body and really get natural. Otherwise, it just stays some concept, can be interesting, but it's not as fun. Mm-hmm. So I worked a lot on finding things to make that first for me easy to understand, and then develop them to transmit them to young musicians that have no clue about that, and by using very simple ways, for example, different senses. I use the visual sense, auditory sense, and kinesthetic sense to do three different things. If you only use one sense, it's undoable, or you have to find tricks to make it. But when you use different senses, it makes it quite doable to do different rhythm at the same time, and it can be very complex at first.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned already the issue that you meet, the fact that you are visiting, and in order to create a new research environment, that you are visiting age-old or century-old cultures that have built up their, let's say, knowledge, but that's also, I'm putting it in very Western terms now, and that you don't, but as I understand, you fear the risk of what is called in contemporary terms appropriation in a certain sense. How do you deal with that? Because you make it very complex. You visit them and then you transmit it, and the students hear, which maybe are also from different, have a culturally different profile. How do you deal with, let's say, not in capitalist terms, but the ownership of the rhythm?
Yeah, very good questions. The thing is, for me, I'm not interested in the form. So, for example, if I go to Bulgaria and I see all those rhythms, I will do my best to integrate them and to play them as good as possible. But I'm not Bulgarian, and I will never play like a real Bulgarian musician. So I'm more interested in seeing those rhythmical concepts or principles, and how I can bring it in my own environment, or in the context of contemporary jazz, if we can say jazz in a very open sense, of course. So that's what I'm really interested about, is taking those principles, understand them, and see how they can enrich your own language, because those are actually basic principles, but depending on the culture, they developed one aspect of rhythm way more than other. So each aspect is actually based on a common rhythmical aspect that can work in any kind of music. Like irregular beats, you can adapt to anything, and that's what I did. I did a whole project called The Mystery of Chem with some ex-students from the conservatory, actually. And I composed all the songs of the album with some of those principles, but it has absolutely nothing to do with typical Bulgarian music or Indian music or African music, but all that is in there. But it's still original and personal music. And I think that that's, to me, that's the most important and exciting thing to do, is how you can get all the richness you can find in the world, but how you can make it yourself and develop something original that you are genuine with.
So in a certain sense, what you try to do is to eliminate the let's say the cultural, historical over-determination of these rhythms to create a kind of, should I call it, idiosyncratic environment where you can do your research. And last question, perhaps, how does your own research questions relate to this pedagogical? Because I feel very much that the pedagogical, in its most noble sense, thing drives you. But how does this relate to your own research questions?
Because to me, all those cultural richness that I started to integrate in my own language, in order to make it grow and to make it alive, I needed to share it and explain it and just share it. And I noticed that I did that because at some point I was practicing on my own different things on that, and I was kind of stuck. I was like, okay, I want to go further, but I can do that, but yeah, I'm not really satisfied. So yeah, let's try to work with other people. And all of a sudden, everything went way further.
So it's by sharing
exactly.
the experience that you accumulate, that you enhance your knowledge,
exactly,
or your experience, your felt sense, to use again that word, for your personal research.
Because it's really not a one way. Sometimes I hear some statement as if when you teach it's a one-way thing, but not at all. I mean, the more I give and the more I get back. So that's very exciting. When you notice that, you want to give more and more.
Okay, thank you. I'll think we leave some space for discussion. The first thing I want to ask: does anybody of the members of the panel have questions for the others? We have three very different experiences, relations, or artists relating with their environment, where the environment is defined very differently, and where the relationship is felt and lived very differently. Do you have to ask questions to each other about it? No, but they will come, and they can come afterwards too. There's one general question I wanted to put. So, if I didn't use the word until now, but can you say that defining and creating a research environment is kind of defining and creating an ecosystem of where your place as an artist, as a creative artist, is central, or perhaps not, perhaps peripheral, that the environment takes over in a certain way. But can you say that are you trying to create a balance between yourself and the environment you need? Or are you just creating, and I feel that there are differences here, are you just or on the contrary, are you not creating a balance, but are you trying to create antagonisms and conflicts? Of course, constructive conflicts, but well, even there is an edge to it. But what kind of ecosystem does yours is it to create dialectic or other conflictual movements, or is it creating a kind of balance, or trying to reach a certain balance between yourself and your environment? I mean, it's perhaps a bit abstract, but I think trying to reach a balance and trying to stimulate as much conflict as possible are different things, of course. How do you how would you define your research environment in these terms?
Maybe I think it's different for all of us, as I could understand, I think. But on my point of view, I didn't really look for or think about the environment. It just created by itself, and then I understood things from there, and that made me more efficient in the work, in the research. But as I think I understood of what I saw, I think it's different for you, for example. I think the environment was more part of the process, right?
Yeah. And I think for me, it's all of these things. It's conflict searching, what isn't there and what can I contribute maybe, or to make it more in balance, or the opposites. Or it's also a place sometimes where I have very little influence, and the conflict is in the fact that can I be there, how can I be there, and how can I bring my artistic practice in this context, and is it, this is also the conflict, the internal conflict. So there are many kinds of ways to approach a certain context or space, or
I just wanted to ask you, Anne, because you deal also with popular cultures or subcultures, and I cannot judge the degree to which they are. You're a part of it, or you have been a part of it before, like the otaku culture, the Japanese culture. You are dealing with the cards, with the manga. And perhaps a bit like the same question as I asked Stéphane, how do you appropriate them or not? Or how do you deal with ownership? Are you accepted or not? Or is that an issue in your in dealing with these subcultural phenomena?
So when I was more involved in the ballroom culture, that was a question all the time, every moment actually. And it was, I was always wondering, how can I be, or can I be here? And so it's a constant question, and I think, I was welcome to be there, and I had just more like a learning approach, and then being able to contribute to an event, to a ball, for example, by creating the trophies. I think it's a grateful opportunity, and it's something, that it's an exchange. So that's very important for me. And then, for example, with the cards, it's the collective is called Mutoko, which isn't and doesn't mean anything actually. It's not Japanese. It just means two names connected together. But the concept of the cards is not necessarily Japanese. But for example, you saw the video with the spinners, the small objects. These are actually this is based on a traditional Japanese game which is called begoma, and you wrap a rope around the spinner and you throw it. And I made my own versions in bronze, and so there is there could be this appropriation, but I kind of relate to what you said also, like how can I internalize it, and how can I, kind of, I always wonder or have this balance, like what is there from me and what is from me anyway, and how much do I take this format, or so it's always a question and a research.
Hannah, about the question about the ecosystem and the balance versus conflict, if you can put it like that.
I don't necessarily see it in this binary that is so strong. I recently, I was thinking also about avatars and proxies, and like I was looking up the definition of a proxy, and like apparently in geological science, proxy bodies are bodies that you investigate and that show like the echoes of very big processes that you cannot measure because they're too big or because they happened so long ago. So for example, like a piece of wood where you can see the rings of the trees can be a proxy body that shows climate shifts in the Holocene. So it's this process is no longer there, but it's still visible in this macro thing is visible in this smaller proxy body, this avatar that shows it. And I think I see a relation to, or an ecology more like this, that you have all these mimetic layers, and that a macro layer shows itself on a micro scale. And I like to think of like also human identity or as more like this, that it vibrates with other levels, and that, for example, if we think about shocks of ecological collapse, which here still are relatively invisible, but that they are already like present in our bodies that are proxies of these larger or proxies in which these larger movements become visible. And so I want to add that actually to what you said before, that it's like I have this individual body, and then in this individual body is shown the echoes of text, of a body of text, but it's not only of a body of text. Like I don't really care about. I could say that it's like what you said. It's like where is it in life, or how do you use it to say something about life? I was going to say I don't really care about art or necessarily. Yeah. It's like as in a very strict, or to make art, or.
Because it's indeed.
It's like how can it be again a proxy to talk about this completely crazy violent, crazy collapsing, crazy processes which we are in.
Yeah, so it's issue. How do you represent something that's bigger than just your particularity? And as I already said about your performance about New Skin, that it's not your birth or your death that is told about or that is represented in a certain way. It's like without becoming too soft or too zweverig, we use in Dutch, bit lofty, about birth as such, and that as such as you could say existentials, and that's also a very difficult balance. How do you create an environment that you want to say something more than just
But yeah, but there is also this idea that you have either you're a narcissist or you're an individual, or either you are part of a collective, or. But I think that is a completely false binary.
I agree.
It's completely false because you cannot have a relation to a community. Or to anybody if you don't know your boundary, if you don't know, for example, what intersectional intersections come together in your, or if you don't know what your desires are, if you don't know what your triggers are, then you can have no relationship with anything. So it's always like a combination.
Yeah, I see you nodding, Stéphane.
No, it's just that it reminds me of that fact of transmission, that if you don't know very well yourself, you cannot translate very well either. And if you don't translate, you'll stay stuck too. So it's really ever exchanging.
Yeah,
thing.
and yeah, especially like if you enter into what you say, like I enter into different cultures. Like if you don't do it, like knowingly what your body, like did you do it as a white man? Like then it's you repeat very problematic structures. Or
What do you mean?
That I mean if you don't. That then you appropriate. That then you appropriate. Like if you don't know, like that you are a white person Western person going in there, that you reproduce very colonialist appropriations. Could
okay.
no?
Yeah, maybe.
I thought that's what we were talking about. But
Yeah. But the ways, how do you, the issue is, of course, how do you surmount, that's the word, how do you get a step further than where of course, personally I think that you have to integrate in a certain way this risk or this, I mean, you're appropriating all the time. You're appropriating also things of your neighbor in a certain way. But when it is at that level of cultural traditions, if that's the right word, then it's a more complex issue. So you have to find out strategies to deal with it without indeed reaching a level of lofty universe.
Yeah, and also go very deep to the, how do you say, the noyau, the core of that culture. You know, like forget about skin colors or behaviors or things like that, to see, okay, that came up, that developed like that in that part of the world, but what is the common thing to everything? For me, that's also how you can appropriate anything in the world. If you stay to the form, of course you can never appropriate it because it seems different. But if you go really to the deepest, to the core of, okay, this music sounds like that, it's amazing, but in fact they developed a principle that's common to all rhythm in the case I'm talking about. But and I think that's also the challenge when you go to something that looks very different, to go, okay, that aspect is very different, and what's the core, what's common to everything, so that relates, that makes everything more relative also. When speaking about difference and stuff like that, I think that could be a good thing for the world in general, to just look for the core of things and not just the separate, everything that separates us or that makes us different. So that you combine what's the difference and what's the core of things.
You wanted to react on that?
Yeah, but no.
I don't know. I think there is a reaction, but I don't find the appropriate or a good reaction. I don't know. Like, it's one is the idea to do that, and the other thing is the reality, of course, as well. Like, it is. Yeah, it's not like that, and so it's important. Yeah, I don't know.
But I think the difference triggers something really interesting, and that's the richness. But then what I mean is to integrate things.
But richness in what sense and when and for who and.
Yeah, just the fact that things are different, and some people develop or went a way that's completely different from some other, and that created some, what I call richness, because it's different. It's something more that the other have something more also. Everybody has something more. But then the hard thing to integrate things is that I think you have to go beyond that. Otherwise, it stays like separate from you. So one thing is that separation might trigger something really strong and might create tension or attraction or whatever. But then if you want to make it yourself and create something from that, I mean, in the case of music and rhythm, if you want to integrate that, maybe for dance or for some other arts, maybe it's very good to keep that difference and use that tension
because
to
you have
create
the advantage
something.
of a more elaborate or more clear abstraction of it than perhaps than performance art has, for instance.
Yeah, I think I would like to react anyway. I don't know the specific situation you're talking about, but I think it's sometimes hard to distinguish between integration and stealing, like, or appropriation, and to distinguish between a form of, like you said, this things we all cultures have in common, or what we have in common, and where that might be true, or where that idea is this kind of Western universalism idea that means just projecting what is us onto everything else and then calling it the shared. But I don't know, like I said, it's a reaction. I don't know in your case how it is or what it is, but I think that it's a huge, it's a very difficult distinctions to determine, and that sometimes we are so blinded by our own, blind to our own racism and appropriation that, like, it's sometimes difficult to distinguish.
Is that perhaps also what you suggested, Amber, about there is the kind of blending, if that's the right word, where you let's say swallow, in the best sense of the word, the subcultures you're dealing with, you're fascinated with. Swallow is not a good word because that's very invasive.
I think,
but that, on the other hand, you have a reality that where differences are not overcome, even if you, as an artist, feel comfortable in a certain way with the mixed with the differences you're concretely dealing with.
Yeah, I think like I have two kind of ways of working: being inspired by something and taking it into my artistic practice, or bringing my artistic practice into another context. And for me, in this, especially in this ballroom or dance experience, also with whacking, it's very important. Like, as I did with the performance with the radio broadcast, it's not it's very important to contextualize it's good and to make it about that and not about me dancing. I'm just, and it's also not about me, how good I am, totally not. I try to be as honest as possible and then not to pretend anything as I am in an artistic context. I always try to never to pretend anything more than what I am in reality. Just a student and yeah. So for me, it's I try to be in it like this, to be honest and yeah, not to pretend anything else than what I'm able of. Or if for example, that's as I did some performances where I'm practicing the dance because I can't do it. I have to practice, and that's also fine. Yeah.
So that the practicing process and the environment you need for practicing becomes part of the
that's then the
output.
artistic intervention also, maybe to create the environment, for it.
I think if we want to keep schedules tight, not that it is the overall law, but I think we have had fine presentations, fine discussion about what environment means, where you can work as an artist, as an artistic researcher. So Hannah, Amber, Stéphane, thank you very much.